Hi, my name is David Rowan. I'm a teacher and master practitioner of modern applied psychology, or MAP for short. And MAP is a synthesis of different disciplines: NLP and hypnotherapy, psychobiology, which is a field that looks at the relationship between language and physiology, a kind of a mind-body healing approach, but also more emergent fields of interest as well, like interpersonal neurobiology and affective neuroscience. And so I'm interested in how language and our brains kind of interrelate and produce the human behaviors that we see, and how language can be used to perhaps change our behaviors. And one day, I have to recount a tale, first of all. There was a scandal in British society a few years ago. A chap had defrauded an insurance company by faking his own death. And he used his hobby as the vehicle through which to suggest that he had died. His hobby was that he was a canoeist, and he became known in the media as Canoe Man. They lived on the east coast of England, him and his wife, and their apartment overlooked the sea. And so they hatched the plan. And he apparently went out to sea one day and never came back. And eventually, the insurance money was paid, and they paid off all their debts. And to complete their deception, they built kind of a false cupboard in the apartment, and he was living in there all the time. And they became discovered because in their infinite wisdom, they went on holiday to Panama in South America and took a selfie. Yeah, they took a selfie and posted it. And then people kind of went, "Oh, I thought you were dead because I went to your funeral and I was upset." So, when you're unconscious, wants things to be revealed, things will emerge. Now, these people on this breakfast program were rather concerned. I very rarely watch breakfast in the morning, but this particular day I happened to have the TV on, and something had emerged in the news which was causing great consternation. There was two presenters and a couple of journalists and this psychologist, and they were criticizing this guy's wife with very, very strong language, because every day Canoe Man's dad walked along the beach looking for the body of his son, and their apartment window overlooked the beach, so she would see him at the regular time kind of walk along the beach very slowly and solemnly, looking for his son's body, hoping for a sign, hoping for closure. And she did nothing. She just watched him in all weathers, in all seasons. He did that for 2 years, every day, without fail. And then he died. He died of a broken heart, not knowing what had happened to his son. His son was in the cupboard. And his daughter-in-law is watching him walk up and down, doing absolutely nothing to rescue him from his plight, doing absolutely nothing to stop his pain. All of his nightmares could have been stopped in an instant if he had known his son was in the cupboard. And she didn't do anything. So they were calling this lady a callous, wicked, evil woman. And they were just about to break to the kind of the news or something. And, the psychologists had been sitting there all this time, not saying a word, kind of listening. And they kind of said something to her, like, "Can you understand this? Can you shed some light on this?" And she said a really kind of throwaway comment just before they cut to some kind of other thing. And she said, "Oh, yeah, it could have been she was nasty things, or it could have just been domino thinking." And they all looked really puzzled. And then they had to cut. And I was puzzled. I heard this, and I thought, "What's that?" And so when they came back, she explained. You see, we might think that we have free will, but stents in the actor's brain suggest it's actually free won't. Dennett says in his books on consciousness that the synapses migrate across a gap, or kind of a neuron electron cell will go across a synaptic gap, not because it's choosing which one to do, but it's a deselection process, right? So if you can imagine that in your brain you have lots of corridors, right? And when you get to the end of a corridor, there's a huge gap. There's a big cavernous gap, and there's a jump to another doorway. and there are about thousands of doorways that you can jump across to. And each one of those doorways is a different thought stream, right? So just imagine, this is a very simplistic example. I know some neural networks are 2 miles long trading through the body. So this is simplistic like you wouldn't believe, but it will serve the purpose just to illustrate something. So imagine someone's got a dentist, and then that goes to react, and then that goes to fear, and then that goes to run away. So you've got dentist, react, fear, run away. And every time they go to the dentist, phew, quick as a flash, they run away. And the steps in between are so fast that the conscious mind can't recognize them. So as soon as the person has the stimulus of dentist, their body is filled with the desire to run away, and they're off. Now, a little bit like a train set, where you can just kind of move a signal point and then the train goes in a different direction. What we can do is have it so that the person has the stimulus, dentist, then react, because they've got to have a response, but change the response. So then the person goes to calm down and relax and even sleep. And when I help people with dental situations like that, they often report that they find themselves becoming more tired, because as soon as they hear the sound of a dentist drill, zzz, their brain responds by going into sleep, whereas it used to go into fear. I find that myself. When I'm in the dentist chair, I actually start finding it hard to stay awake. It's just useful, you know. Now, she said this phrase, domino thinking, and they asked, what do you mean? She said, well, just imagine a scenario. So the scenario is, we've got to get some money. We don't know how to do it. We can't develop skills. We can't write a pop song, you know. So the only thing left to us is to commit a crime. Right. Which crime should we do? This one. So they choose the faking death and getting insurance. That means all other crimes are now excluded. So the doors to jewelry robbery, to being a highwayman, they close. So now there's only one door to go through. So they go through that. Domino one. Right. And then, right. Well, we can't let the word spread, can't let anybody know, because love and scandal are the best sweeteners of tea, right? So we can't tell our friends. Next one. Well, if we can't tell our friends, we can't tell our extended families, right? Well, yeah, we can't tell the boys. They had 2 grown-up sons. They didn't tell them. But then we can't tell your dad. Narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow opportunities for variety. This kind of domino thinking then means that the person's thought streams, because of the original very broad sort of philosophical orientation they had, kind of funnels and takes them into a single point where it's not necessarily wickedness that's driving it. It's just that it's the only option available. At least that's how the brain is functioning. Another kind of illustrative example, I guess, is to think of literally Nazi Germany. You know, after World War I, there wasn't any money. The economy had crashed, but there were some sections of the population that had money. So they were targeted. They were obvious. Well, these people have got money, our money, presumption, right? Well, let's stop them using it, right? Well, they're still getting money, though, because they're doctors and they're carpenters and things. Well, then they're not allowed to operate in their professions anymore. Right. Well, they're still going in shops with the money they do have. Right, they're not allowed to do that. Well, they still live amongst us. Right, well, they're not allowed to do that. And that leads to a meeting in a chateau where they discuss the details of the final solution. And through a process of domino thinking, the very clever human brain suggests Zyklon B gas. So it's not necessarily that a person has a wicked, cruel heart and it's their intention and they've been marked by Satan. It can be sometimes that a person has a kind of a domino thinking process taking place in their brain. And it's often driven by a kind of broad belief system or philosophy, a value system to begin with, and then it begins to narrow. That's how people become indoctrinated. That's how religions, for example, have used guilt amongst their kind of young children so that they won't turn against God because the guilt will get them. There are cults that install phobias so that if you leave the cult, then various things, you'll get AIDS, or you'll be run down by a car, or that kind of thing will happen to you. I could only imagine what must have been said to the people who flew aeroplanes into the Twin Towers. For them to make that activity the best decision they could make that day, there must have been an awful lot of conditioning that took place before that. When a human being who's 80% water picks up a cigarette for the first time and, takes a drag, well, that's curiosity. Human beings are adventurous and curious, so we'll go, ugh, right? And now, what's interesting, of course, is that the human being then has a second one, and it's that second one that's interesting. And I'm always interested in what leads up to that decision point, because if someone gave me a bowl of porridge and kippers, smoked fish and porridge mixed up, I think, oh, no thanks. And if I had one taste of it, I definitely wouldn't want seconds. Would you want seconds? No. Right? But you see people do behaviors, they find that the behaviors are uncomfortable or dangerous, and then they do them again, and that lets you know that the decision making isn't being done consciously. There's an unconscious pattern, and an awful lot of domino thinking has already taken place to get the person to that decision point. So I know sometimes we can see and we can watch human behavior, and we can get wrapped up in the content of what's taking place and call the people bad or the people wicked. Therapeutically, it's actually easier to make headway with people when you separate the behavior from the person. So, little Johnny isn't a bad boy, he's a good boy who did a bad thing. So you can criticize the behavior and change the behavior while the value of the person is held constant. In some circumstances, that's very hard to do because we have our own biases. We have our own kind of things that are important to us. And when we see people transgress those, it's very tempting to see those people as nasty or bad rather than what they do. For example, when Margaret Thatcher died in 2012, Facebook was kind of torn in half by people pro-Maggie, anti-Maggie. The love and hate, schism was really broad. And I watched this for a couple of days, and I noticed therapists were finding themselves in a paradox because they hated Margaret Thatcher's policies, but they've learned to become compassionate therapists. And how could they be a compassionate therapist while detesting this woman? So I wrote a thing to separate all of them. And I said, a soul has gone home today, and a family has lost their mum. What hasn't happened, of course, is that her ideology hasn't died. And I'm sad about that. So I separated the family person from the soul, from the politics. So you can have a soul love for the soul. You can have a dissociation because you're not a member of the family to the family, but sad bereavements and things, condolences. And at the same time, you can wave a flag or wave a saber at the political ideology because that's not who the person was. That was just something they did. And so, as a therapeutic approach and a way of being able to understand the cruelties sometimes or the stupidities of human nature, bear in mind sometimes it's domino thinking, and many trains of thought has led to, for some reason, what they're doing being the only logical option that they have. Now, if you look at Syria, etc., with that in mind, then it starts to make a bit more sense. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. There's no way at all I'm justifying a human being causing harm to any other life form, or ignoring the protests or screams of people. That's something that my brain is not conditioned to ignore. However, it just might help with a little bit of understanding to maybe reposition some of the anxieties that people have about these things. It also explains how ISIS are very good at kind of grooming people into going. So be careful. Advertisers, commercial people and politicians use what they call nudging or domino thinking a lot. So be aware of it. If you find someone getting you to go yeah, then yeah, then yeah, you suddenly notice options are closing. Be careful, be mindful. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.